Welcome to this Fireside chat at ABG Sundal Collier. My name is Simon Jönsson. I'm an equity analyst here at ABG. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming John Vestberg, the CEO of Clavister.
Thank you.
For those who maybe don't know Clavister, could you maybe give a short introduction about the company?
Absolutely. So we're operating in the cybersecurity domain, obviously a very hot topic at the moment. We are one of the few European, especially one of the few Swedish cybersecurity companies that provide a full range of products and solutions that, addressing the cyber threat, which is obviously an increasing threat as we speak. We're mainly targeting what we refer to as mission critical applications. So that's practically public administration, energy utilities, defense and telecom. So areas where a successful cyber attack has quite dramatic consequences.
And your products, as far as I understand, they basically stem from like a similar core technology.
Absolutely. So we're a software company by heart, and we have a set of software, in-house developed software IPR. That's the common base for more or less all of our products and solutions today.
And what about locations or geographies? You're based in Sweden, you have most of the revenue from Sweden, but you're also active in other countries?
No, absolutely. So, obviously focus is Europe, and more specifically the Nordics and the German-speaking region. So that's where we have our own staff and our, the most presence. On top of that, we have a partner network that basically addresses almost all countries in Europe. We have a number of global key account customers as well, where the business is by nature more global.
And in recent years, you have sort of gone through strategic changes. You have made some restructuring. Can you maybe walk us through just where you are now in terms of that? You have some costs, and you are reworking the sales model a bit?
Yep, absolutely. So we've been through quite a number of changes over the past years. So we went from a situation where we basically were sort of navigating our go-to-market model. We tried different customer groups, and we had quite a diverse both customer group and geographic presence. We decided to focus our business, and focusing both in terms of geographies to the ones I just recently mentioned, as well as the customer groups that I talked about earlier. As well, we took quite a hard shot at our cost base and realized that for us to grow profitable, we need to both work on the top line side, but also have a much more stringent OPEX control. So that was sort of the key changes we made at that time. Also, we changed our business model from a more sort of perpetual type of business model over to a SaaS type or subscription-based model with a dominant part being recurring revenue coming from software licenses today.
And how has this translated into your reported growth? Because you target 20% annual growth, and you are around that level currently and have been for a few quarters. But looking back, you have delivered slightly lower growth than that in the recent years. So is the current growth a result of that shift in the go-to-market model, or?
It is. It is a sort of it is the consequence of all those changes taken together. So moving back maybe 3-4 years, we were not seeing the growth that we expected. We were more or less stagnating in terms of business and growth. If we look now, we have 11 quarters of consecutive year-over-year growth, and the most recent quarters, obviously, the growth levels are fundamentally higher than what we were used to back then. So it's what we see, at least, is a sort of a trend with increased growth rates as we go.
You have an ARR metric, which is recurring revenue, and you have a base of around 125 million of those revenues currently. Can you maybe talk a bit about what's behind that, and what are the growth drivers within the recurring revenue base?
Absolutely. So to start with, we have we have designed our business into 4 areas, representing 4 different characteristics of our customers and our solution base. 2 of those areas are in the traditional network security, firewall domain, if you like, and the other one is within the identity and access management space. Both those areas are what we refer to as our base business. Represents a fairly stable, growing business distributed over many thousands of customers and even more so tens of thousands of contracts or licenses. This means that part of the business represents the bulk of our recurring revenue. It's again a stable business, it's a growing business, and a fairly low risk business from a churn perspective. Then we have our 2 other businesses, our defense and telecom area. By nature, they represent larger contracts, but also longer time to order, longer time to revenue, obviously, and much more lumpiness. Whereas when we see larger orders coming in from those areas, they absolutely add a great bonus to our growth. So that's sort of where the business lies at the moment.
What do you think, coming back to the 20% targets over the coming years, what will be the sort of base business growth in the recurring revenue base, and what will be those defense and telecom orders, you think?
What we see currently with the focus, and especially with the market drivers, with increased cybercrime and cyber threats, our base business has absolutely the potential to be well above those 20% we have as target. If we look at the telecom and defense segments or sectors, again, it's very lumpy. So you have to extrapolate a longer period of time to really see a growth trend. But the individual year-over-year business we see right now, we're looking at 30 to 50% year-on-year growth. But again, from a very lumpy situation.
And turning a bit to the defense side, you have a few quite interesting partnerships, I would say. BAE might be the most commonly known, but you also have recently partnered with Thales from France and General Dynamics down in Spain.
Yep.
So maybe just walk us through, what's the development in those different partnerships. You have orders from BAE currently, but you don't have orders from the rest. So we walk through the sort of timeline on those different partnerships.
Absolutely. So to start with, what we're doing within defense, I think that's important to emphasize. We're not talking about general IT or cybersecurity for the defense industry. Think of data centers and those kind of solutions. I mean, that's general firewall business. What we have selected as a much more niche target is what we refer to as tactical cybersecurity. So that's cybersecurity that resides in the tactical level of a defense system. That might be within a tank, on a defense platform, in a missile system, areas where it's obviously extremely sensitive from an attack perspective, but it's also an area which is undergoing rapid digitalization right now, and it is a fairly new market. So it is I wouldn't call it an immature market, not at all, but it's a fast-growing market where we see much less competition given the overall cybersecurity industry.
And what is the competition?
There are some other niche players, but typically, because the digitalization is fairly young in that area, there is no, the market landscape hasn't really settled yet. So you can't point at large players who are really dominating in this field. So you will find a number of smaller local niche players, sometimes also in-house developed solutions by those providers. Within that field, as you mentioned, we are working mainly with the defense contractors, so that would be the BAE Systems, Rheinmetall, General Dynamics of the world. We have so far been most successful with BAE Systems because it's also our first and original client in this area. We're part of 4 nations of deployments of the Combat Vehicle 90, where our products are being integrated into those vehicles. So that's quite a good track record, I would say. And then in recent time, we've been adding new clients to that portfolio. So you mentioned Thales from France, where we recently signed a memorandum of understanding to be part of their systems and solutions as well. You mentioned General Dynamics, which is obviously a competitor to BAE Systems, and the objective is to be integrated into vehicles or platforms on their side as well.
Which one of those 3 you think has, from a long-term perspective, the biggest potential for you?
I mean, the boring and easy answer would be all of them, because they are representing quite unique market opportunities on their own. They are not head-to-head competitors in all cases, and they are all 3 very large organizations. So I think from a short-term perspective, obviously the BAE partnership has the highest potential because we're most mature in that relationship, whereas the others are very probable to be at least in the same type of magnitude, but a bit later on.
And can you please walk us through a bit about the revenue model in this kind of, in the defense industry and those kind of contracts? Because of course you have the deliveries, which is lower margin, but then how much of the total order is going to be like services and software and stuff over time? And is that going to be part of the recurring revenue base?
So in essence, I think you can look at 2 different types of solutions or delivery models. One being where we're integrated with our software running on purpose-built hardware, like in the BAE Systems case. Typically perpetual licenses, at least right now, because this is an industry that is by heart a bit more conservative and more used to buying things on a capex model. I think that will change over time, but currently it is more perpetual and hardware-centric, which means that the gross margins are roughly 50% in that business. Then we see other types of platforms. I mean, you mentioned Thales as one example. In those cases, it will be a pure software delivery model, and with a higher likelihood that we're looking at a full subscription type of model. And obviously, because it's our own IPR, it's 100% gross margin. So as that part of the defense business grows, we believe that the gross margins will slowly but surely start to increase also in defense.
What do you think is the timeline until we can see some sort of order activity from Thales or Dynamics? It took a few years for the BAE contract to really take off.
Yeah, I think it's clear to set expectations straight. I think it's reasonable to look at the cycles within the defense industry, realizing that from budget allocations from the Ministry of Defenses to concrete tenders and procurement processes with the contractors, and then that has to trickle down to the sub-suppliers, including Clavister. That is a process typically over several years. We've seen, of course, that as we deepen our relationship, for instance, with BAE Systems, time to order for new contracts or new projects becomes shorter and shorter because, there is a certain momentum in that. But for new partners and new projects, I think it's realistic to look at the 24-month time frame just to set the expectations right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Turning a bit to the profitability side of the business, as mentioned, you have worked to reduce the cost base quite efficiently, and now you are growing better as well. But you're still not on black numbers. You're still in the red. But you said that you expect to be profitable. But can you give us maybe a sense of what kind of timeline we should expect for you to become profitable?
I mean, to start with, if we look at the EBITDA levels we have right now, and I think we've been able to sort of solidify positive EBITDA numbers and growing EBITDA numbers over the past 2 years. We're approaching positive EBIT as we speak. it's not unlikely to see, you know, full year positive EBITDA level within the next 6 to 9 months, you know, that type of time frame. In our case, EBIT and cash flows are more or less, you know, congruent. We have, of course, a net debt to manage, so our finance net is essentially what remains to be financed from our business. But from a pure EBIT perspective, that's quite, you know, short term until we reach that level.
And you mentioned interest cost. You have raised some money. So what is the plan to allocate those funds? Is it to pay down the debt to the European Investment Bank, or?
Correct. So I mean, our balance sheet consists, from a debt perspective, mainly of our European Investment Bank loan, a bit slightly less than 20 million euros of loan. We have a plan whereby the capital we raised is structured in 3 tranches. So basically, one tranche that was already raised in the beginning of this year, around 17 million euros or 170 million SEK. Then 2 additional tranches, one coming now in September and one coming in March next year. From those 2 additional tranches happening now and next year, the liquidity from those tranches will be used to pay down the debt in total from those tranches, which means that after that, in combination with better cash flows, we will have a, you know, net debt situation which is absolutely manageable for the company, and where, of course, the long-term play will be to refinance that using standard commercial banks. And with the EBITDA levels we're approaching, I think we're on debt EBITDA ratio, which is perfectly fine for a tech company.
Great. I just want to come back to one question on the defense side before we end. You talked about competition mainly coming from, you know, smaller local players, but, you know, historically you have been competing with the large American companies. So
absolutely.
What's the reason why you don't mention those companies?
Mainly because even though the tactical defense security market is huge for Clavister, it is a niche market from a global cybersecurity perspective. So the big incumbent vendors of the world, the Fortinets and Palo Altos, it's a bit too tiny market for them to, you know, adjust or develop their products into that segment. The enterprise market is way bigger, which is their home turf, obviously. So I think that's the reason why we're not seeing them.
Great. Thank you, John, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.